My knees hit the wet asphalt with a sickening crunch that vibrated all the way up to my teeth. The freezing rain wasn't just falling. It was stinging, slicing through my thin cotton pajamas like needles. I gasped, the air leaving my lungs in a white puff, and instinctively curled my body around the two tiny bundles in my arms. My 10-day-old twins, Eric and Emily. They were screaming, their high-pitched cries the only sound in the dead silence of the suburbs at midnight. I looked up, water streaming into my eyes, blurring the vision of the massive oak door towering above me. Standing in the warm golden glow of the hallway was Olivia, my mother-in-law. She didn't look angry. She looked satisfied, like she was taking out the trash. Beside her stood Richard, my husband, the father of the babies I was clutching so hard my knuckles were white. He wouldn't even look at me. He stared at his shoes, a coward in a cashmere sweater. Trash belongs on the curb, Olivia spat, her voice cutting through the wind. Don't come back. The heavy door didn't slam. It clicked shut. The deadbolt slid home with a sound that felt like a gunshot. The porch light flicked off, plunging us into total darkness. I sat there in the mud, shivering, homeless, penniless, and broken. Or so they thought. Because as the cold seeped into my bones, the tears stopped. The fear evaporated. A cold, hard rage took its place. They thought they had just evicted Natasha, the broken orphan with no family and no future. They had no idea they had just declared war on Clarissa Hamptons, the billionaire CEO of Hamptons Global. And I was about to turn their entire world into ash. I'm Clarissa, and this is the story of how I let a family of vipers think they were better than me, only to crush them when they least expected it. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or treated like dirt, you need to watch this until the very end. The revenge I took wasn't just sweet, it was absolute. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell, because you do not want to miss the details of their destruction. Let me tell you how I ended up on that pavement. For years ago I was tired. I was worth $8.4 billion, but I was exhausted by people. Men dated me for my portfolio. Friends liked me for my connections. My own fiancé tried to embezzle $5 million a week before our wedding. I realized I was surrounded by parasites. So I created a ghost. I created Natasha. I bought a modest identity, a used Honda Civic, a small apartment in a rougher part of town, thrift store clothes. I stripped away the designer labels, the private jets, the power. I wanted to see if anyone could love the girl without the gold. That's when I met Richard. He bumped into me at a library, spilling his coffee on my sketchbook. He was charming, sweet, and seemingly humble. He told me he worked in logistics. I didn't tell him that I owned the logistics company he worked for. I didn't tell him I owned the building his parents lived in. I just watched him. For 2 years he was perfect. He bought me cheap flowers that meant more to me than diamonds. He listened to my worries about making rent. He held me when I cried about having no family. I fell in love. I really did. I thought I had found my unicorn. But the mask started to slip the moment I met his family. The Wallaces were people who had a little bit of money and thought they were royalty. Olivia, his mother, looked at my scuffed boots and sneered within 5 seconds of meeting me. "So this is a charity case?" she asked, sipping wine I knew she couldn't afford. Cooper, his father, ignored me entirely once he realized I had no connections. And Josephine, his sister. She was a viper in a sundress. She hugged me and whispered, "I don't know what you're doing with my brother, but don't get comfortable." I ignored the red flags. I was in love. I married Richard in a small ceremony because Olivia said they wouldn't waste money on a wedding for nobody. I paid for the dinner myself using my savings. I moved into their house to save money for our future. I cooked. I cleaned. I played the part of the grateful poor wife. Then the pregnancy happened. When I showed Richard the test, his eyes didn't light up. They went flat. "Twins," he said, his voice hollow. "That's expensive." When we told Olivia, the temperature in the room dropped to sub-zero. She slammed her hand on the table. "You did this on purpose. You're trapping him. We don't have room for a litter of children." My hand went to my stomach protectively. "They are your grandchildren, Olivia," I said softly. "They are burdens," she hissed. "And you better earn your keep, Natasha." No free rides in this house. That was the beginning of the nightmare. My pregnancy was high risk. The doctors ordered bed rest. Olivia ordered house cleaning. She fired the maid the next day. "Since you're home all day getting fat," she told me, tossing a mop at my feet, "you can clean. Top to bottom. Every day." I was scrubbing grout on my hands and knees at 6 months pregnant. My back was screaming. My ankles were swollen to the size of grapefruits. I looked up once to see Richard walking past me. I waited for him to take the sponge, to help me up, to defend me. He just stepped over my legs. "Dinner's late," he muttered. "Mom's not happy." That was the moment the first crack appeared in my heart. He wasn't a victim of his mother. He was her soldier. But I stayed. I stayed for the babies. I told myself it would get better once they were born. I was delusional. The abuse escalated. They started rationing my food. "You're gaining too much weight," Josephine said, snatching a plate of pasta away from me. "It's gross." I was eating leftovers in the kitchen while they dined in the dining room. I was starving, sneaking crackers at night just to keep my energy up for the twins growing inside me. Then came the staircase. I was 7 months pregnant, carrying a laundry basket heavy with Cooper's work clothes. I was moving slowly, gripping the rail. Josephine was coming up the stairs. She was on her phone, smiling. As she passed me, she didn't move to the side. She lowered her shoulder. She checked me. Hard. It wasn't an accident. I felt the intent. The basket flew from my hands. My feet slipped on the polished wood. I fell backward, the world spinning. I screamed, my hand flailing blindly for the banister. My fingers caught the wood, wrenching my shoulder from its socket, but I held on. I dangled there, feet kicking empty air, my heavy belly slamming into the railing. I pulled myself up, gasping, shaking so hard my teeth clattered. I looked up at Josephine. She wasn't horrified. She was disappointed. "Oops," she said, stepping over the spilled laundry. "You're so clumsy, Natasha. You should be careful. A fall like that could solve a lot of problems." I locked myself in the bathroom that night and installed the first hidden camera, a tiny lens in the vent. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was an investigator. I recorded everything. The insults, the threats. And then I caught the conversation that changed everything. I was in the kitchen 2 weeks before my due date, making tea with trembling hands. I heard low voices in the living room. It was Olivia and Cooper. "The investigator says the photos are almost ready," Olivia whispered. "Good," Cooper grunted. "We need them watertight. Once those brats are born, we need a cause." "Unfaithful," Olivia hissed. "We prove she's a whore. Richard gets custody. We kick her to the curb. We raise those babies right. Without her influence." My blood ran cold. They weren't just being mean. They were planning a kidnapping. They were going to frame me, steal my children, and throw me away. I went into labor 3 days later. It was a 20-hour marathon of pain. Richard sat in the corner of the delivery room playing Candy Crush with the volume up. When Eric and Emily were finally placed on my chest, slimy and screaming and beautiful, I looked at Richard for a spark of love. He looked at them like they were bills he couldn't pay. "They're small," he said. That was it. We went home to a war zone. Postpartum recovery is brutal. I was bleeding. I was leaking milk. I was exhausted. Olivia banned me from the living room because the babies smelled. I was confined to the guest room. I didn't sleep for 10 days. Every time I closed my eyes, Olivia would bang on the door. "They're crying again. Shut them up." I was a zombie. I was weak. And that's exactly when they struck. It was midnight on the 10th day. The witching hour. I was sitting on the edge of the twin bed in the guest room, nursing Emily while Eric slept fitfully in the bassinet. The door burst open with such violence it slammed against the wall. I jumped, shielding the baby instinctively. Richard marched in first, followed by Olivia, Cooper, and Josephine. The energy in the room was sharp, jagged, and dangerous. Richard's face was red, his eyes wet with fake tears. Olivia looked like a predator who had finally cornered its prey. "Get up," Olivia commanded. "Pack your things. You're leaving." My heart hammered against my ribs. What? It's midnight. What are you talking about? Josephine stepped forward, a smug smirk plastered on her face, and threw a manila envelope onto the bed. Don't play dumb, Natasha. We know what you've been doing. I reached for the envelope, my hands shaking. Photos spilled out. My breath caught in my throat. They were photos of me, or someone who looked exactly like me from the back, kissing a strange man in a park, entering a hotel room, holding hands at a cafe. They were high-quality deepfakes. Terrifyingly good. This isn't me, I whispered, looking up at Richard. Richard, you know this isn't me. I haven't left the house in months except for doctor appointments. Your mother tracks my location on my phone. Liar. Olivia shrieked, stepping closer, her spit flying onto my face. You've been sneaking out. You've been cheating on my son. Those bastards aren't even his. Richard looked at me, his face twisting into a mask of disgust. I defended you, he said, his voice trembling. I told them you loved me. How could you? Richard, look at me. I screamed, standing up, clutching Emily to my chest. Look at Eric. He has your ears. He has your nose. These are your children. Do not let her do this. I want a DNA test, Richard mumbled, looking away. Until then, Mom is right. You can't stay here. Get out. Cooper barked from the hallway. Take your trash and get out of my house. It is freezing outside. I cried, panic rising in my throat like bile. They are 10 days old. You will kill them. Then you better find a shelter fast, Olivia sneered. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my flesh, and yanked me toward the door. I grabbed Eric from the bassinet with my free arm. I had no diaper bag, no purse, no coat, just the pajamas I was wearing and the blankets wrapped around my babies. They marched me to the front door like a criminal. Richard opened it, letting the icy wind blast into the hallway. He put his hand on my back, the hand that used to hold mine, and shoved hard. I stumbled out onto the porch, barely keeping my balance. And don't come back begging, Olivia yelled. We'll call the police. The door clicked shut. And that brings us back to the pavement. The rain, the cold, the realization. I stood up. The shivering stopped. I walked down the long driveway to the street lamp, the only source of light in the darkness. I shifted both babies to my left arm, ignoring the screaming of my muscles, and reached into my pajama pocket. I pulled out a phone they didn't know I had. My encrypted satellite phone. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 2 years. Miss Hamptons. The voice on the other end was deep, alert, and dangerous. It was Maxwell, my head of security. Protocol Omega, I said, my voice cutting through the sound of the rain. Location is the Wallace residence. Get here now. Bring the team. Bring the lawyers. And bring the war chest. 83 minutes, ma'am, Maxwell replied. He didn't ask questions. He heard the tone in my voice. He knew what it meant. It meant total annihilation. I stood under the street lamp, shielding my babies, watching the curtain in Olivia's living room twitch. They were watching. Good. I wanted them to see. 3 minutes later, the silence of the suburb was shattered by the roar of engines. 3 black armored SUVs tore down the street, their headlights cutting through the rain like lasers. They screeched to a halt in front of me, boxing me in a protective formation. The doors flew open. Maxwell jumped out, holding a massive umbrella, his face pale with fury as he saw my condition. Get her inside. Now, he barked. A medical team swarmed me. Gentle hands took Eric and Emily. A warm wool coat was wrapped around my shoulders. I was ushered into the back seat of the lead vehicle. The interior smelled of leather and safety. I looked back at the house one last time. The curtain twitched again. They were confused. They should be. Where to, Miss Hamptons? Maxwell asked from the front seat. The penthouse, I said, leaning back and closing my eyes. And Maxwell? Initiate the asset freeze. Tonight. We drove into the city, the skyline glittering like diamonds. My real home. When we arrived, my staff was waiting. Nannies took the twins to the nursery that had been ready for months. I walked into my bathroom. A room larger than the entire ground floor of the Wallace house. I turned the shower on as hot as I could stand it. I scrubbed my skin until it was raw. I washed away the dirt of the driveway. I washed away the smell of their cheap detergent. I washed away Natasha. When I stepped out, I didn't put on sweatpants. I put on my armor. A white tailored suit, sharp enough to draw blood. Red lipstick. Stilettos. Clarissa was back. I walked into the dining room. It had been converted into a command center. My legal team, financial analysts, and PR crisis managers were sitting around the long table. Laptops open, screens glowing. "Report," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. My CFO Linda looked up. "It's a bloodbath, Miss Hamptons. We own everything." She tapped a key, and a chart appeared on the main screen. "Richard's job at Blue Line Logistics? You own the parent company. Fire him," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Gross misconduct. Blacklist him from the industry." "Done," Linda said. "The house?" I asked. "The mortgage was bought by our distressed debt fund 6 months ago. They are 2 months behind." "Foreclose," I commanded. "Serve the notice at dawn. 72 hours to vacate." "Josephine?" I asked. "She runs an online boutique," my investigator said. "Uses a warehouse in the district." "My district," I noted. "Cancel her lease. Lock the doors. Seize the inventory for unpaid rent." "And Cooper? Pension fund managed by Hamptons Financial. Freeze it," I said. "Audit him. Every penny." I watched the emails flying out. The notifications pinging. It was a digital firing squad. But I wasn't done. Financial ruin was too easy. I wanted them to lose their reputation. I wanted them to be pariahs. "Set up a press conference for tomorrow morning," I said. "Title it, 'The Billionaire's Secret,' and invite everyone." I looked at my reflection in the dark window. The rain was still falling. But I wasn't cold anymore. I was on fire. The sun rose over the city, casting long shadows, but for the Wallace family, the darkness was just beginning. By 8 a.m., Richard tried to badge into his office. Security stopped him at the turnstile. They handed him a box with his personal items and a letter. He called my old burner phone, screaming, "Natasha, what did you do? I just got fired. They said the order came from the owner. Who are you sleeping with?" I watched him on the security feed from the building lobby, ranting like a lunatic. I didn't answer. By 10 a.m., the sheriff taped the foreclosure notice to Olivia's front door. I saw the Ring doorbell footage. Olivia rips the paper down, her hands shaking, screaming at the empty street. "This is a mistake. We have rights. You have nothing, Olivia. You have absolutely nothing." At noon, I stepped onto the stage. The flashbulbs were blinding, a sea of white light. Every major news network was there. I stood tall, the image of unshakable power. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady and amplified across the room. "For the last 2 years I lived a lie. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I had. I thought I found a family." I paused. The room was silent. I was wrong. I pressed a button on the podium. The massive screen behind me lit up. The audio from the hidden cameras blasted through the speakers. "Trash belongs on the curb. Those bastards aren't his. Push her. Accidents happen." The gasps in the room were audible. Reporters covered their mouths. "These people," I said, pointing to the freeze frame of Richard shoving me, "threw their own flesh and blood into the freezing rain at midnight. They claimed I was a cheater. They claimed I was a parasite." I looked directly into the camera lens, zooming in tight. "Richard, Olivia, Cooper, Josephine. You wanted Natasha to leave? She's gone. You are now dealing with Clarissa Hamptons. And I am taking everything." The internet exploded. Within an hour, #Justice for Clarissa was the #1 trend globally. The Wallaces were doxxed, shamed, and destroyed online. But I had one final card to play. The Ace of Spades. My investigator had found a secret Olivia had buried deep. A secret named Sophie. A week later, the Wallaces were staying in a cheap roadside motel, the only place that would take cash. I sent a car to collect them. They thought I was going to offer a settlement. They walked into my office looking like ghosts. Richard's clothes were wrinkled. Olivia's gray roots were showing. Cooper looked 10 years older. They stood before my desk, trembling. "Clarissa," Richard croaked, reaching out a hand. "Please. We have nothing. The kids. Are they okay?" "My children are thriving," I said, my voice ice. "No thanks to you. We made a mistake," Olivia whimpered. "A mistake." I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "You committed crimes. But I have a surprise for you." I pressed the intercom. "Send her in." The door opened. Sophie walked in. She was 30 years old, a nurse with kind eyes and a face that was a mirror image of Olivia's from 30 years ago. Olivia gasped, clutching her chest. "Who is this?" Josephine whispered. "This is your sister," I said. "The daughter your mother abandoned at a fire station when she was 16 because a baby would ruin her image. Just like she tried to ruin mine." Sophie looked at Olivia with tears in her eyes. "I spent my whole life wondering what was wrong with me," Sophie said, her voice shaking. "Why didn't you want me? But now I see." Sophie stepped closer. "You're a monster. I'm glad you threw me away. It saved me from becoming you." She turned and walked out. Olivia collapsed to the floor, wailing. It wasn't a cry of sorrow. It was the sound of a narcissist who had lost her mask. "Get them out," I said to security. "Wait." Richard lunged forward, falling to his knees. "The DNA test. You said we could do a test. Please, Clarissa. I'm their father." I opened my top drawer and slid a single sheet of paper across the mahogany desk. "I did it for you. 99.9% match. They are your children, Richard." He grabbed the paper, sobbing. "Oh God. Oh God, I'm sorry." "And," I added, leaning forward, "I have a permanent restraining order. With the video evidence of your abuse and endangerment, no judge in this country will ever let you near them. You sold your children for your mother's approval. Now live with it." Security grabbed them by the arms. They dragged them out, screaming, begging, pleading. I watched the door close. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I just felt clean. 1 year later, I stood on the balcony of the penthouse, the wind playing with my hair. It was a beautiful spring day. Behind me in the living room, Eric and Emily were toddling across the carpet, chasing a robotic dog. They were 1 year old today. Happy, healthy, safe. They would never remember the cold rain. They would never remember the names Richard or Olivia. I had rebuilt my life, but stronger. I launched the Natasha Foundation, a billion-dollar initiative to provide legal aid and safe housing for women trapped in financial abuse. I turned my trauma into a shield for others. As for the Wallaces, justice was poetic. Richard works at a car wash 3 towns over. He sends letters. I burn them. Olivia had a nervous breakdown and is in a state-run facility alone. Cooper and Josephine work minimum wage jobs, living in a cramped studio apartment, miserable and hating each other. I picked up Emily, swinging her into the air. She giggled, a sound like pure magic. Eric grabbed my leg, demanding to be held. I scooped them both up, my arms full of my world. They tried to break me. They tried to erase me. But all they did was polish the diamond. I looked out at the city, holding my children tight. I won. Not because I destroyed them, though that was satisfying, but because I saved us. To anyone watching this who feels small, who feels trapped, who feels like they are standing alone in the dark, you are stronger than you think. Don't let them define you. Rise up. Take back your narrative. And if you have to, burn the bridge so you can see your way forward by the light of the flames. This is Clarissa Hamptons signing off. If you enjoyed watching bullies get exactly what they deserved, hit that like button. If you think I should have done more, comment scorch the earth below.